Okay, so let's talk about leftovers. Nope, not the kind in your fridge. I mean leftovers on an entire farm. You know, deep inside some ancient legal texts, there's this really strange and fascinating rule about what you're supposed to leave behind after a harvest. It sounds pretty weird to us today, but it might just hold a powerful idea we've completely forgotten. So let's get into it.
And here it is, right from the source. It's a command to farmers, and it's crystal clear. When you're done picking your grapes, don't go back for every last one. Just walk away, leave some behind. But you gotta wonder, right? Why? And who is this for? And get this wasn't just, a nice suggestion. It was the law.
So what's the deal here? Is this just some weird old farming rule for an ancient society? Or is there something way bigger, something totally revolutionary hidden inside this command about leftover grapes? That's the question we're gonna unpack.
And here's the thing you have to understand. This rule about grapes, it wasn't a one-off. Not at all. It was actually part of a much bigger, intentional system that was woven into the very fabric of the harvest. You could even call it a form of social policy, known as the gleaning laws. And what's really fascinating is when you start to see the pattern. It wasn't just for grapes. The exact same principle applied to grain. If you drop a whole bundle, you just leave it there. It applied to olives. Don't go back and shake the branches a second time. The fact that this rule shows up again and again for all the major food sources, well, that tells you this was no accident. It was a deliberate built-in safety net. All right, so if farmers are intentionally leaving part of their harvest behind, who exactly was meant to collect it? Well, the text is incredibly specific and really consistent about this. It wasn't a free-for-all. It was for three particular groups who, back then, were the most vulnerable people in society. First up, the foreigner, or, the immigrant. You have to remember, in that ancient world, your entire security was tied to two things, your land and your family. A foreigner had neither. They couldn't inherit property, and they didn't have a local family network to back them up. They were pretty much on their own, both financially and socially. Second, the orphan. And specifically, this meant a child who had lost their father. In a deeply patriarchal world, the father was everything. He was the family's main provider, their legal representative, the whole shebang. So if he was gone, that child and their mother were immediately pushed to the very edge of survival. And third, the widow. It's a similar story, right? When a woman lost her husband, she lost her primary source of economic stability and social protection, just like that. Her standing in the community suddenly became incredibly fragile. So there they are, the foreigner, the orphan, and the widow. They were the designated recipients of the gleanings.
So we know the what, leave food behind, and the who, the vulnerable. But now we get to the most fascinating part, the why. I mean, what kind of thinking, what kind of worldview leads you to create a legal system that is based on being intentionally inefficient? It's kind of wild. And it was all rooted in a few really profound ideas. This whole mindset was really built on three core principles. First, the idea of stewardship, not ownership. The thinking was that the land didn't ultimately belong to the landowner. They were just managers. Second, this was a dignified safety net. This was not a demeaning handout. It was an opportunity for people to provide for themselves through their own work. And third, and this one is huge, it was all based on empathy that came from their own history. And here it is, the key to the whole thing, found in the very next verse. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt. Wow, it's a direct command to connect their current good fortune to their past suffering. Their own experience of being vulnerable foreigners was meant to be the engine for their compassion. They had to show mercy because they knew exactly what it felt like to desperately need it. Now, I know what you might be thinking. This is a 3,000-year-old law for farmers, so what could it possibly have to say to us today in our world of global supply chains and high-tech everything? Well, it turns out the principles behind it are timeless, and they pose a direct challenge to some of our most common ways of thinking. Let's just look at the contrast. The ancient mindset saw resources as fundamentally shared, with the community having a built-in claim on them. The modern pressure? It's all about maximizing profit and efficiency above all else. That ancient law saw empathy as a non-negotiable duty. Today, we often view charity as a voluntary option, right? Something nice to do if you can. This old law demands that we don't squeeze every last drop of profit out of our resources, but that we intentionally leave space for others. And that leaves us with a final question. This ancient law of gleaning was basically a command against total, ruthless efficiency. It was a mandate to leave something behind for those in need. So as we build our businesses, our careers, and our lives around maximizing every possible return, it's worth asking, In our pursuit of total efficiency, what are we forgetting to leave behind?